We will start the morning off with our guest speaker, Ron Hambley. Ron is the President and Chief Operating Officer of the Winnipeg Construction Association and has been working in the association management field for 25 years, working with various business and construction groups in Manitoba. Ron received his Master's in City Planning from the University of Manitoba, a Certificate in Economic Development from the University of Waterloo, and his undergraduate degree from the University of Winnipeg. In addition to working with WCA, Ron is also a director on the Workers' Compensation Board and a member of the Board of Governors of the Manitoba Institute of Trades and Technology. Please help me welcome Ron.
Well, good morning, everybody. I ran into Peter a few weeks ago in our office, and we were chatting about a few things, and he said, would I come and speak to the realtors at their annual meeting, give a bit of a recap on what our industry association is up to, and maybe a look at some of the projects that we're dealing with around the province. I said, sure, I'd be happy to do that. So I'm really pleased to be here today to share what we're up to over the next few minutes. And when I was putting this together, there are literally so many projects out there and so many interesting projects out there, it's really hard for me to try to determine what to share with you. But our industry has been really busy. So I'd like to provide to you today sort of an outlook of what's underway and what's planned, and maybe just highlight some of the challenges and opportunities that we have in the construction industry. It's basically a very good news story. Winnipeg Construction is about 111 years old. It started out as the Winnipeg Builders Exchange in Winnipeg, and its primary focus was always to share construction opportunity information for our members. It takes quite a number of contractors to put a project together, and for them to share the construction plans, specifications, etc., in order to get bids together, it takes a lot of sharing and a lot of cooperation, and that's essentially what our office had done for the first 100 years or so. We have 750 members in Winnipeg and around Winnipeg. We work very closely with our counterpart in the Brandon area. And we're allied with the Canadian Construction Association, which has about 20,000 contractor members across the country. So as I said, our true purpose in life, I suppose, was to share construction information, but I spent a lot of time on advocacy, working with the various levels of government, primarily provincial and municipal. Our federal group, Canadian Construction Association, does an excellent job at federal lobbying, so we tend to stay away from that one unless it's a local related issue. But advocacy, information, and more recently education. And I touched on this in our discussions with Peter. We've been doing a lot of this, and our members are really appreciate it. A word about the number of, on the information side, I suppose, a word about the number of projects that we typically are tracking and dealing with over the course of a year in our office. Last year there was about 2,400 projects that were tendered through our facility. We have a couple of products that are privately held that our members have access to, one of which is a Projects Out for Tender site. I mentioned in our discussions earlier that our membership is largely paperless today. Unless you get to a job site, I suppose, but where our office was full of rolls and rolls of construction drawings, you see that so rarely today, and that's happened very rapidly. So we have a couple of online sites where we track projects out for tender, and on any given day, any hour, there's probably 150 projects tendering, and then we have a very active pre-construction news product we call it Buildcast, and it's available to our members as well. And I'm going to reference that in some of the project listings. Buildcast and the Buildcast staff, we have about 3 reporters that do nothing but phone architects, engineers, owners all day long, and they have great relationships with them. And over the course of a number of years, we've built a project database. It probably has 3,000 projects in it. They may be 5 years away from shovel in the ground. They may be 6 months away. But we have very good information about what's coming, and that helps us forecast where the industry is going to be. It's a very competitive environment, certainly, and it's been, as I said, it's very active over the course of the last decade or so. As I mentioned to Peter, we've probably in the last 5 years jumped headlong into industry training. We recognize that we have some great colleges in Winnipeg, Red River College and Winnipeg Technical, now MITT, delivering a lot of the training for our members, supervisors, estimators, engineers, and we don't want to duplicate that, but our members are telling us, or have been telling us, that they've got foremen, supervisors that need skilled up. They can't put an ad in the paper and have a superintendent show up anymore. They need to take the one they have and make them better, or split a crew and make two where they had one in the past. So we've been delivering training that relates to supervisory training, our BST program, Building Supervisors for Tomorrow, and it's the advanced version of that. Typically there are 16 modules to a course, maybe 80 hours, which the individuals can take over a course of a few months in our facility. We also do a lot of training on just understanding construction documents, a very complicated process, and we help people learn how to estimate at the entry level. We do that. We also have a Project Managers Skills Academy, which is a 3-day, very intensive workshop that we host in our office a couple of times a year. We also do a very interesting course called Construction 101, and the market for that is people that are new to the industry. They might be working for an architect or an engineer or the city or a crown corporation, and have been thrown into construction in some way, shape, or form. Maybe they're in part of the procurement phase, and they really don't know what the terminology is or what bonds are, etc. So we take 3 days and give them a crash course in construction, and it's called 101. So we've been doing a lot of this in our facility on Waverley. We moved a few years ago, bought a furniture warehouse, renovated it. We have about 30,000 square feet of space on Waverley. We have about a 10,000 square foot classroom facility. It has 2 or 3 or 4 different rooms depending on how it's split, and they're very busy. We also been really lucky in the sense that Red River College has been doing some of its code training in our facility. The Building Standards Board has been meeting there fairly frequently. So it's also open for other industry players that want to meet that somehow relate to the construction industry. It's our facility. We get a lot of use out of it, and we're very proud of it. I would be remiss if I didn't mention construction safety. The Construction Safety Association of Manitoba is the largest group in the commercial construction safety business. They very much run independently. They have about 17 staff in Winnipeg and a small office in Brandon. That's a program of Winnipeg Construction Association. We started it, we manage it, but they're very much an entity unto themselves. I'm very proud of them. Construction is an industry that's prone to injury. As Peter mentioned, I sit on the Workers' Compensation Board. It's something we take very seriously, and we're working very hard at reducing the number of injuries in that sector. One of the other things we do, and as you know, and I'm sure you do, we're famous for golf tournaments and curling and all kinds of other networking events. Anything that involves fun, booze, and golf is probably a good, safe, construction-related event, and we do lots and lots of those. But one of the things that we started about 5 years ago is probably the most fun event we do. It costs a fair amount of money, but we decided that we were very unhappy with the career symposiums that we were attending and presenting and talking to young people. There's a large one in Winnipeg that's hosted for a couple of days at the Convention Center. There's one in Brandon that I attended just recently. But we decided a few years back that we just weren't engaging young people. So we built our own Career Expo. It's one day. This year it's May the 13th in a great facility at the Red River X. And we essentially just let the students play. We let them play on heavy equipment, light equipment, lifts, tools. They're building, working. This young lady in this picture is actually doing some roofing with a real air nailer. And this is probably the only time any of those kids that come to that event get to touch a tool. So it's been really useful for us. It's been, the feedback's been very positive. We invite schools. We subscribe to schools. We're literally oversubscribed today. We can handle about 1,800 kids over the course of a day. It's about 50 schools from all over southern Manitoba. They come from as far as Dauphin, believe it or not, for that day. And they're very engaged. We spend a few minutes with them on a safety briefing beforehand. We get them with some safety equipment and some glasses, etc., so the probability of injury is reduced. And we have a great time. We got a little bit of pushback at first, so our industry said, If there's any objections between schools and the students, try to overcome them. So we pay for busing. If the school division can't pay for the bus, we pay for the bus. If they only want to bring half a class, we'll pay for a substitute teacher. So this event has about a $60,000 or $65,000 budget for the course of a day. Our members do it as volunteers. There's about 40 interactive workstations, and it's a lot of fun. And we're starting to see some re-engagement with young people in the industry. A couple of other things we do, and again, in the interest of time, I didn't really want to spend a great deal of time on, but and I'm sure your industry and others certainly have them too, is a couple years ago, or 18 months ago, we formed a group called the Young Construction Leaders, which is our under 40 club. Great group of people, very engaging. They have a great agenda and meet probably 4 or 5 times a year in networking events and construction tours. Very engaging young group of people, and I think it's really, really important for industry associations like ours to reach out and offer opportunities for that group, who will be our leaders of tomorrow. The second one, and our industry has always struggled to attract the female sector to the industry. We have a Manitoba Women in Construction group, which is about 150 members strong. They do, again, networking, events, boardroom meetings, tours of construction projects, and they've been really, really successful in engaging the women in the construction industry of late. 2 great groups, both work under our umbrella. We have staff that work with them. So if you see Young Construction Leaders, Manitoba Women in Construction, they're initiatives of Winnipeg Construction Association. We're super proud of them. A word about construction volume, and you probably know this as well as I do. We hear from Stats Canada on a fairly regular basis how well the permits are doing in Manitoba. We're very interested, obviously, in the year-to-date stuff. Permits are a great bellwether for our industry. They're certainly not a true indicator of volume. A lot of the engineering-related work doesn't require permits and doesn't get tracked as effectively as certainly a building permit or a housing building permit would be. But having said that, the volume and the volume increase in our industry has been really phenomenal over the last decade or so. Last year we did $2.8 billion in Manitoba in both residential and commercial building permits. It's about triple what it was less than 10 or 12 years ago. So our industry, and certainly on yours, enjoys that volume, that increase in volume, but certainly that does bring some issues along with it, which I'll mention in a second. But we've had tremendous increases in volume, construction activity. I'm not sure when it's going to plateau. We always scratch our heads and wonder. I would have thought 2014 would have been the plateau. Not so much. We surpassed the prior year. And this year's been fine. It's not probably as active as we saw last January. We always use the Stats Canada commercial permits with a bit of a grain of salt because each individual permit has such a high value. They bounce around from month to month. So the year-to-date stuff is something I look at. The message really here is the volume increase and how much it's increased over the last decade. Obviously, that volume increase has impacts to shortages, and there was a report issued earlier this week by a group we work very closely with, BuildForce, out of Ottawa. BuildForce has 10 different committees, one in each province, that deal with labor market information. The report that you have on your table is the work of that committee locally. And it's probably, and we've been doing this for probably a decade, it's probably the most reliable commercial construction forecast that we have. So I'm not suggesting it's a be-all and end-all, but the BuildForce group has a very dynamic group of economists and specialists in demographics that come to the table. We supply them with the local flavor, with a list of major building projects in the Manitoba marketplace. Together we come up with a forecast and try to work through where we see shortages in various skills. Bottom line is we're going to be significantly short based on the demographics in Manitoba with what we see for recruitment and what we see for retirements. We're easily going to be 11 or 12,000 people short over the next 5 years, and we've been saying this for quite some time. I guess the interesting thing about this week was that Alberta is starting to really slow down, at least in their forecast. I'm not sure. We certainly haven't seen people returning, and people have been asking me if we've seen people returning. That hasn't been the case, and I think we may be, that may be some time away yet. They're still completing the work that was already underway in Alberta, and until they do that, I'm not sure we're going to see any return in any significant way on the skilled trade side. However, Manitoba is booming, and it's got its own shortages with labor. The other one, I guess, is the elephant in the room, and certainly you can't, as a Winnipegger, escape the discussion that we've had over the last few months on projects, several specific projects, which I won't name specifics, but you know them. We have a couple of reporters. Are there any reporters in the room, by the way? No. You sure? Okay. We have a couple reporters in the room. One in particular is really, really well connected, and his information, some of which is in the story that appeared in the paper, I think it was last week, is really accurate. A little bit sarcastic, kind of funny, but his sources are impeccable. I think if you read that story, and these are some of the major projects we've seen, some of them are quite convoluted, some of them would have thought would have been fairly straightforward, but there's a couple of themes in them, and I think that's what I'd like to speak very briefly about, is we're starting to see more and more projects get underway with very incomplete designs, and that may be by plan or by chance. In the past, we would see a school be out for tender, and the drawings would be literally almost 100% complete with very little potential for change. Today, we're seeing what might be a 70% design with a stipulated sum, in other words, a fixed bid, and clearly there's going to be changes throughout the course of the project. Clearly, there's going to be cost changes, yet they're still stuck with a budget that they developed about 5 years prior to the design. So we're starting to see the impact of that. There's another project delivery method that attempts to get things moving a little quicker, that is more of a sort of design as you go, design on the fly, design build, design assist. And again, there can be obviously cost changes throughout the course of the budget, and we're seeing the impact of some of that. So it's a little difficult for us sitting in the back and knowing how these projects are going to jump in and comment, but we're seeing some of that. And one of the issues that our industry is facing along with the design community is that whole incomplete documents piece, which is we're really, really struggling with, as is the design community. Another issue we've spent a bit of time on, and this may be something you're very familiar with, is the cost of construction. And there have been some comments in the media the last couple of years. One in particular was referenced in this quarterly report by Cushman Wakefield, and in this circle, you can't read it obviously, but it references Winnipeg as having some of the highest construction costs in Canada. This certainly wasn't the first time we heard this. We've heard it based on the cost of concrete, for example, in Manitoba is very high, allegedly. We've heard it from Economic Development in Winnipeg, as hearing it from some of the people that are thinking of relocating in Winnipeg. So Economic Development in Winnipeg, we have some good friends there, and myself, we connected with Hanscom, which is a very, very significant national quantity surveyor. So between ourselves, Winnipeg Construction and Economic Development Winnipeg, we paid Hanscom to do a construction cost survey, the results of which are available. I can get them to Peter. They were published in our Upward last year. And essentially what we did was we found a project, fully designed project that had been built in Winnipeg in the last year. We got permission to use it. We gave it to Hanscom, and they priced that same job in 7 Canadian cities, and very extensive pricing. They used a Class A budget, which is plus or minus 5 either way, and we spent a lot of money on this study. The results are fascinating. You would think that there'd be widespread changes over the course of those 7 Canadian cities, largely Toronto West. Really not so much. Vancouver, for example, had significantly cheaper envelope costs. Obviously, they don't insulate with the climate that they have in Vancouver. However, on the other side of that, they build a fair amount of seismic activity. So we don't do that. In Winnipeg, we spend a tremendous amount of money and time on foundation work to try to get buildings to stand up in the mud. They don't do that in Toronto, where they might build in bedrock. So there's all those pieces that we fit into the puzzle. There's very little, and the project was about I think about a $15 or $16 million job. It wasn't huge, but the differences between the cities were largely negligible. The one issue, and I'm not going to spend a tremendous amount of time on it, and certainly I'm not going to rant and rave on it, but one of the issues that we do have, and particularly in our industry, commercial construction industry, is taxation, and it's the impact of the PST in commercial construction is really dynamic. Essentially, and with the increase in PST, it's obviously even more so. But the difficulty is not necessarily the tax rate, but it's the scope. So in the last decade or so, we've seen government attach design services, engineering, architecture fees, insurance, bonding. All of those services are now taxable where they once were not. And even more so, a few years back, they actually increased and applied tax to mechanical and electrical labor. So the labor component of a major construction job is taxable. And the way our industry works to make it even worse, typically our industry delivers a project PST included, and the owner attaches GST to it. So PST is embedded, not split out, and then GST is applied on top of it. So it's a very, very significant factor in the price of construction in Manitoba. Typically on an average job, mechanical, electrical might be easily a third of the entire budget. That was one piece that came out in the survey, and the provinces, and I'm not advocating for HST in any way, but the one that seemed to make the most sense on our side of the industry was how Ontario did it with HST. It was very clear in terms of the total taxation embedded in a project or attached to a project, whereas Manitoba is very unclear. So anyway, that study is available, very interesting. I know Economic Development is using it as one of their tools in their toolkit when they're talking to people about relocating or building in Winnipeg or building in Manitoba, and trying to dispel the notion that it's a very high-cost construction economy. Enough of that. Let me give you a little update on in terms of what's happening around the province. Certainly, we've spent over the last decade or so, we've spent a tremendous amount of money on healthcare, and that continues. We've got a couple huge hospitals underway in Winnipeg today, Winnipeg and Selkirk. The Women's Hospital is out of the ground and well along its way at about $160 million down there on Bannatyne or William. The Selkirk Hospital is about $100 million. It's well underway as well. We're tracking a Grace Emergency, which is a fairly significant project. They're just finishing up about a $40 million diagnostics building at Health Science Centre, it has the helicopter pad on the roof, so that'll allow stars to land. And there's on that same campus, there's both a proposal for a new tower for the Manitoba Clinic, and one other one that escapes him right now. Nursing is building another building on Bannatyne too. So the U of M campus, or Hill Science Centre campus, has always been very, very busy. Speaking of U of M, they just completed, and they've been building like crazy down there as well. They just finished their active living center. They just opened it up. It's a fabulous new building, and they've built a similar one of these at Brandon University in the last 5 years or so. Next on the line is a redevelopment of Taché Hall. That's underway with the ART complex. It's finished. The next big piece of Taché was about a $40 million concert hall addition in behind Taché. They've tendered this twice and haven't been happy with how it's come out, but it's fully designed and ready to go. U of M is just not happy with the pricing, so I suspect they'll be back and forth on that a little bit, but U of M has been reasonably active. I'm not even going to show a picture of the stadium, but I understand we're going to be doing some more work there. I think one of the more interesting, and I don't even know how to characterize this, whether this is commercial, institutional, whatever, but one of the more interesting things is the amount of property the U of M acquired when it purchased Southwood Golf Course. And it's quietly working away on a master plan for that site. We know that it's the terminus of the BRT. Beyond that, we know there's some residential, it's going to be some commercial, it borders on Pembina Highway, it borders on a very nice residential district. There's some huge development potential there, and we're really looking forward to seeing how that thing rolls out in the next few years. Certainly not to be left out, Red River College has got its plans. They just finished a couple of projects, including the Culinary Arts campus in downtown, renovating the Union Bank Tower. It's a fabulous space, but they've been spending some good amount of energy on a new, what's it called? It's called I want to get the title right. It's called the Skilled Trades and Technology Center. Essentially, it's a complete renovation of the trades area, the construction trades area at Red River College. The first phase is about a $60 million reno of the existing space. The second piece brings the total budget up to about $175. And it's essentially taking the existing space and completely redoing it and then adding a fairly large chunk on top of that. And the first piece of that is under design right now. Not to be left out, I mentioned MITT, Manitoba Institute of Trades and Technology, which is down the street from me, and I sit on their board. There's actually an announcement on today, about a funding announcement today for an expansion at that particular school. They're oversubscribed in terms of students and really tight for space. Certainly, U of W is not going to be left out. They just finished a brand-new field house, which is fantastic. My daughter plays soccer. She's been in there a few times. They're replicating this actually up in Garden City right now and in another indoor soccer complex. But the next one on the radar for U of W is the Commons, Colony Street Commons. It's a residential complex across the street. They've been poking around at that. It's in design now. I'm not sure how the funding on that one is going, but they tell us that's proceeding. Our design friends tell us that project is proceeding. Certainly around the province, we typically build at least 10 schools a year. It's hard to believe, but we do. There's 10 or 12 underway or will be underway very shortly. These are roughly $20,000 to $25,000 a piece. They're very tightly budgeted and very carefully built. Some of the ones like the one shown here, I think that's up in the Maples, a fabulous new collegiate up there. But this tends to be a sector that's very busy both in renovation and new construction. Sort of on the institutional side, we're following another one. The Inuit Art Gallery is planned attached to the existing Winnipeg Art Gallery in the back of it. It's about a $33 million job. I know there was an announcement, I think last week or the week before, about the Manitoba Museum and an expansion of a gallery there. A little further down the street, there's been some incredible, I don't know if you've been to the zoo this summer, but the Journey to Churchill exhibit that's just completed is absolutely stellar. And it's sort of the second major addition to the zoo after the Qualico Family Center, and there's a long list of projects the Conservancy is working on at the zoo, so that we're tracking all of that very carefully. Probably the most anticipated one for us, because we spend a fair amount of time at the convention center, is the expansion of the RBC Convention Center. About an $180 million project. It's on schedule and on budget, I'm told, aside from a small hotel issue, which I'm not sure how it's going to get resolved. But we toured this a couple of weeks ago. It looks really interesting. The spaces are fantastic. The windows are amazing. There was some discussion about the venue actually being ready for Grey Cup. I think they're trying hard for that, but I don't know if they're making any promises. The contractor told us very carefully that substantial performance is the early part of November and complete total performance is into January. So they're close. They're close. It's technically possible. Around the province, there's a couple of other ones that we're tracking. Obviously, Center Point downtown is a big one. The new offices of Stantec, Alt Hotel, and a Parkade. Very major project for downtown, anchored across the street from the MTS Center, is almost complete. The Aviation Museum, the Royal Aviation Museum of Manitoba, Western Canada rather, is fundraising rapidly. I noticed there was a line item in the City of Winnipeg's budget on this one. I think they're planning to relocate their facility and build a new museum on the same property that the terminal was on. I think the old terminal was on. At least that was the last word I heard. So that's proceeding well. The famous project, True North Square, I guess that's going ahead. Bowman's on site in the paper today. About a $400 million project. We've been tracking this one for a while. Initially, it was rolled out as something called Sopo Square, and it involved an office tower, and the owner was chasing a fairly major lease, I think the Liquor Lottery's lease piece, and they still are. So that's a big part of this, and that announcement, I'm told, is will happen fairly shortly, and their timeline for getting into the space is really short. So if this does go, it'll go quickly, at least from the first phases of it where the office piece is concerned. So we're really looking forward to that. I drive by this one every day, the redevelopment around the IKEA and Seasons of Tuxedo and the outlet on the other side. On the outlet side, the northernmost boundary, they've been servicing it all winter, so it should be ready. I understand probably the first one in there will be one of the luxury car dealerships that's expanding over into that area in fairly short order, and then from there on there's two fairly significant housing projects over there. Spot Condos is going really well. I think that's about a $50 million project. There's a picture of it on top there, and the apartments below are located just beside the Cabela's, but incredible amounts of residential, multifamily residential, as I'm sure you well know. You drive around Winnipeg, they're everywhere, literally everywhere. I think this one's Cornerstone. A number of, on the commercial side as well, there's a picture of the Marriott here, the last hotel at the airport, the last of the three. These little hotels are popping up everywhere all across Manitoba. There's probably about 5 of them on the books today, in addition to the McPhillips Street Station Hotel, and probably one around the convention center related to the True North piece. Residential, as I said, is going really well. You can't miss it in Winnipeg. It's probably the strongest sector, multifamily. These are, Assiniboine Landing is going really well. They're being very careful about that project and doing a really amazing job of it. It's about a $60 million project on the Assiniboine River, and of course Glass House in behind the Centerport project, or Center Point project, is just underway. That's about a $30 million project. Both of those are going well. Bison Point is a little closer to us. They've been pounding condos into that area off Bison Drive for the last few years. They continue to do that. Another one downtown is the D condo on the old Dubrovnik site. That's about a $30 million project, and it's underway as well. So this is probably, as I said, this is probably the strongest segment. I'm not even scratching the surface in terms of listing them here. Some of the other opportunities that we can see, there's been lots of discussion, particularly with the completion of the Canadian Museum of Human Rights on that parcel of land immediately across the street, sometimes called Parcel 4. The Forks has some really interesting multifamily, light commercial, parking related facilities planned for that one, and I think we'll see that underway sooner rather than later. And then the picture on the bottom is Assiniboine Downs, and there's lots of discussion out there. There's several players involved. Red River X, as I mentioned, in the facility that we use for our Career Expo, they're planning on replicating that building about 4 times for an agricultural convention space, similar to what Brandon has. And we're really excited about that one. I think that's moving ahead. Shindico has the lands immediately to the west of that, and there's some early discussions about what's happening in there. And of course, the Assiniboine Downs / Jockey Club have been in discussions, frustrating our government, I think, in discussions with hotels and casino development, which may or may not happen. But we're tracking that one fairly closely. I think this one you might be familiar with. Sky City? I have no idea.
Yes, that's familiar.
No one does. If you have some money, I'm sure they'd talk to you. Came out with a bit of a bang at first. We're still tracking it. They're still optimistic. We talk to them, call them, contact them probably on a quarterly basis. They still say something's happening. I wouldn't hold my breath on that one. Interesting nonetheless. On the industrial side, this is a picture of Boeing. They quietly expanded their building out in the Murray Industrial Park very significantly. They're very secretive about their processes. In fact, I think I took this picture from across the street and they chased me down the street. And so Boeing has expanded very significantly, as has Standard Aero in the last couple of years, and Magellan, and including their engine test facility out on the airport property itself. So that sector has been strong. It's driven largely by composites, and it's a sector I know Economic Development in Winnipeg is promoting hard. So we're very encouraged with that kind of confidence in the Manitoba and Winnipeg economy. This one's right across the street from my office, and I've kind of enjoyed watching this one go up over the last 6 months or so. This is Epic MTS Data Center. It's about a $45 to $50 million server center. It's the first of its kind in Manitoba. There's been other companies that have built data centers. Canadian Tire built one at the Air Canada Center, and Great West Life built a big one over in St. Boniface Industrial Park a few years back. This one is the first that's not dedicated to a single individual. And it's massive. We watch hydro string additional power lines into the building. We can see the cooling systems that are in place. But I think, and I think part of the marketability of this facility in future is the fact that we have free cooling 8 months of the year and very low energy rates. So you would think these would make good sense. And they're, it's high tech, probably not a tremendous number of jobs, but the ones that are in there are very skilled, and it'll bring in some good revenue for MTS and Epic for certain. Staying with sort of the industrial theme, CN just finished the most beautiful building for their locomotive training center. We've got some photographs in our office that are stellar. They went way beyond what they should have done. It's a gorgeous building, and again, it's a real vote of confidence for a national railway to be increasing its training facility in the Winnipeg marketplace. I'm really excited about that. And speaking of rail, I'm on the Centerport Advisory Committee, and we've been routinely updated on their progress with the multimodal rail facility at Centerport. Last year, we saw the completion of about a $200 million highway, the Centerport Way, which we understand will be expanded through north of Headingley, coming out roughly at the Whitehorse to bring traffic around the north side of the city. Centerport continues. They've been very active in terms of commercial real estate and industrial development, and we're looking forward, holding our breath, to announcement of the multimodal facility in Winnipeg. They're actually building about a $35 million water treatment facility to service Centerport, which is underway today. And GenStar, which is that yellow piece on the corner there. That's that little inset photo. GenStar is also planning to do about 3,000 units of housing just north of the tracks in between Saskatchewan there. So that was part of a proposal we heard in the last couple weeks. Not to sort of head north, our mining companies in northern Manitoba continue to be very busy. Vale and Hudbay talk to us on a regular basis. Thompson Smelter still planning to shut its doors in 2019, I think, but they're still continuing to do development work and a new mine shaft in the Thompson area. The processes will change slightly, and some of the final processing will probably occur off-site, maybe even into Newfoundland. But in the Hud Bay area, Lalor Lake, etc., they're doing a lot of work around Snow Lake, and we're seeing lots of our members doing a lot of work up in that area. I didn't really want to spend a tremendous amount of time on infrastructure. I think it's something we hear a lot of. It's probably top of mind these days. Manitoba will spend a couple $100 million a year on replacing roads and bridges. Our members do all the bridges and structures. My friend Chris Lawrence and his group do most of the roads, water, and sewer work. And that's their deal. But it's a very significant expenditure. We've heard the debates in the last couple of weeks at City Hall in terms of prioritization of underpasses versus bridge replacement. All of that's going to cost a tremendous amount of money. And we certainly know it doesn't seem like they can make a dent in the damage that's out there today. So we've got a lot of work to do. There's some very significant ones on the way. The Highway 59 interchange just north of Winnipeg is in discussion right now. I know there's 3 proponents with P3 proposals for that piece that are ready to get underway very shortly. Obviously, the BRTs is a good-to-go piece, whether we like it or not. And we've got, again, there's a P3 proposal on that one with a couple of proponents, some of which are our members, so we kind of get a sense of what's happening on that side. But a couple of very major projects, infrastructure, in addition to all the other work they're doing. One of the ones that has been doing a fairly significant amount of work is the East Side Road Authority as they work their way up the east side of Lake Winnipeg. This is where we're not supposed to build power lines, but they're busy building roads. That's my political message for the day. We spent about $90 million to date. The total project budget for East Side Road is about $325 million. All in all, and it'll probably take another 5 years to complete, and they're working very closely on that. There's some very significant bridges and work done there. 2 that I will mention very quickly that I find really interesting. We had a proposal on these, or a presentation on these by the City of Winnipeg a couple of weeks ago with groups of our members. And these tend to fly under the radar. They're very large projects. They're funded by ratepayers. 2 of them, and they're mandated with licensing arrangements to have the nutrient removal of both wastewater treatment plants in Winnipeg very, very shortly, like within a few years. And there are significant developments required to meet those targets. This one is the South End Waste Treatment Plant. The foundation work is actually underway today. It's about a $335 million project. It's big, and it's underway. The tenders for probably 3 related projects within this one are due at the end of this year, 2015. The one piece I find really interesting in the proposal of the city are very careful about quoting budget numbers, and the number they quote for this one was 335 minus 20 to plus 30. So that's their range. It's a big project, and that's a big range. And I would suggest that that's a fairly large range to still be at when you're in the ground. The next one is even larger, and it involves the North End Water Treatment Plant, wastewater treatment plant. There's 2 projects in one here. The first one is the biological piece, and the second one is the sludge treatment facility. The first one is $547 million. The second one's $225 million, both which will be underway in probably a year and a half to 2 years. Very significant plus minus on that one too. So that those ones could be much larger than even that. But together they're huge projects for the city, and they're attracting international attention. The last one I'll mention, obviously, is hydro. You know, we've heard tremendous amounts about hydro, so I'm not going to belabor the point. But our members have been working at Pointe du Bois over the last 2 years. It's about a $400 million spillway replacement. That's the picture on the very top. An interesting project, a dam that Hydro inherited from the Winnipeg Power Authority. They didn't update the generators, but they replaced the spillway, which was floating downstream over the last 2 years. The next one along the way is obviously Bipole 3, and this picture is the camp at Kiiwetinoong, which is north of Gillam. It's the landing spot for the converter station, and it's also a convenient location to launch the next dam, which is Konawapa. But Kiiwetinoong, Bipole 3 together about $4.6 billion. Riel is also a part of that, the Riel converter station, which is just by Deakin, which has been underway for a couple of years now. Its budget's about $400 million, and it's well on the way to being complete. So now they're building the other converter station at Kiiwetinoong with its camp, and starting Bipole 3. Bipole 3, we're already seeing construction tenders on that one. Certainly the last one is, and this was a picture that was taken yesterday up at Kiask, which is just south of Gillam and on the end of Split Lake. They've got the coffer dam underway at Kiask and the beginnings of a 2,000-person camp, which is like a little city. They built a permanent recreation center up there, and these massive construction camps that are under construction now look like a series of hotels stacked one on top of the other. It's a fantastic project. Their in-service date starts 2019, so that's what they're shooting for, with completion in 2021. That dam is about $6.5 billion. So these are very significant projects. They do attract local and national partners, international partners in this construction. So that's kind of the hydro summary. Those three projects are real. They're not seeking licensing. All of that's been done. They're under construction, and we'll certainly be employing hundreds and hundreds of our members over the next few years. So that's kind of it. I wanted to give you an idea of what our industry is up to, what our association's been doing. We're very pleased with the amount of work and the variety of work that's happening in the industry. Sorry?
Sorry to interrupt.
Question?
Because I know we got to get on with our meeting.
Yeah.
I just wanted to give everyone the benefit, because I know especially for some of our commercial members, how that, and you've really been the one leading it with Mike and the home builders, how that whole fast tracking the building permit process is going.
Okay.
You can just give a quick
Sure.
little something there.
Sure.
Thanks.
We started the building permit file 2002, I think, and we've been meeting quarterly ever since. And I've seen 7 different directors of planning and development and lots of different staff, but it is moving forward. And we've literally tried everything. I think we've made a list of everything we could possibly try, and we've worked our way through most of the list. So now we're at a process of they're publishing their targets, which they would never do in the past, and they have developed an expedited methodology for dealing with commercial permits and a slightly different process for residential permits. But the expedited piece, which is really interesting, essentially relies completely on the design community by saying, you built it, you designed it, you stamped it, it's good to go. So the idea is that the city will rely very much on the design seals of the professionals and basically deal with the plan examination and the inspection on an audit basis. So technically what they're shooting for is a 5-day approval as opposed to the 6 or 8 week approval that we're seeing now for some of those commercial projects. So it's been a long journey. I think we've got the city listening to us. It's a tremendous revenue source for them, which we continue to let them know. It generates and fills a very significant reserve fund, which others raid on a regular basis. But I think we've got their feet to the fire, and we're starting to see some really good progress on this particular file.
That's great.
And that's about it. I say we've got lots of balls in the air. The industry's busy, and we're really pleased, looking forward to 2015.
Thank you, Ron. Thanks for providing us. Thanks for providing us the details regarding the projects that are taking place and that are on the horizon. These are certainly of benefit to our city, and it's important to realtors that we are kept up to date.